The waitress had just set 4 plates on the table when my son-in-law asked my wife how much a wheelchair lift controller cost. Ruth looked up from her soup and asked which controller he meant. The one you promised to the Walker family. I told them we would figure something out. Cole leaned across the booth and tapped 2 fingers beside her water glass. You told them we would cover it. The part alone is several $1,000s, and you didn't know that. Our daughter Erin stopped unwrapping her silverware. Ruth reminded him that the Walker's van was how their son got to work, but Cole reached for the black phone beside her purse instead. It was the after-hours line for his mobility shop. Ruth had carried it every other weekend for almost 9 years. You answer this because you need to feel needed, he said. Not because you're qualified to make decisions for my company. A man at the next booth glanced over, then studied his plate. Ruth folded her hands and asked Cole to put the phone down. He slid it to Erin. You're done taking calls. I should have stopped this a long time ago. I had known Cole since he was 27. I had seen him work through the night with road salt in his hair, lose his temper, apologize badly, and return the next morning. I had never heard him reduce my wife to a lonely old woman looking for attention. I asked for the check. Cole told me not to turn the conversation into something else. When I said I was only paying for dinner, he answered that paying was how I avoided being told no. There was enough truth in that accusation to keep me quiet. Before I tell you what I did the next morning, tell me where you're listening from tonight. Family arguments sound different when somebody once made you feel useful, then blamed you for being there. Ruth and I drove north through a wet March snow. After 3 traffic lights, she admitted that she should not have promised an expensive part from Cole's inventory. I told her he could have corrected the decision without putting her on trial in a restaurant booth. You heard what he said about you paying, she said. I heard it. I'm trying not to answer while I'm angry. Keep trying. Ruth never needed me to pretend she had made no mistake. She needed me to recognize that a bad business decision did not excuse a planned humiliation. Cole's company was called Bridgeline Mobility. It converted minivans for wheelchair users, installed hand controls and transfer seats, and repaired lifts that failed with somebody waiting outside. 6 people worked from an old alignment shop I owned near Interstate 75, including Erin, who managed schedules and insurance claims. I had spent 36 years maintaining city buses, mostly wheelchair lifts. Ruth had coordinated transportation for students with disabilities. We understood the work before Bridgeline existed, which was both the reason we helped and the reason we interfered. The business began during freezing rain 11 years earlier. A mother called Ruth because her adult son's van lift had stopped at the bottom of their driveway before an early medical appointment. Cole and I lay on wet pavement under the side door while Ruth stayed inside the van, keeping the young man calm. The motor was fine. Winter salt had corroded a ground connection behind the access cover. Cole cleaned it. I held the light, and the platform rose with a slow metal groan. On the drive home, Cole said somebody should build a business for people who could not wait weeks for dealership service. Ruth said the business also needed to answer after 5. I offered Cole the alignment shop at less than half the rent charged nearby. He agreed to keep one bay available for urgent repairs when possible. We trusted an unwritten understanding to carry more weight than the lease. The morning after the dinner, I found the lease in the file cabinet beside my desk. The current term ended August 31st, and a renewal required both sides to sign by April 3rd. Ruth came downstairs while I was reading. She saw the pages on the kitchen table and told me not to turn her embarrassment into permission. Cole has 6 employees and customer vans in pieces, she said. "You don't get to decide for me because he embarrassed me." Her warning should have stopped me. It slowed me down for less than 2 hours. At 9, I drove to Bridgeline. Dana Ruiz, the lead technician, had the side panel off a silver van and was tracing a salt-damaged wiring harness. She moved to another bay when Cole asked me into the parts room, making it clear that neither of us deserved an audience. Cole started by admitting that his comment about Ruth needing attention was wrong. He said he would call her, but he also said she could no longer authorize free parts or rearrange work. I asked why the company had continued routing the after-hours phone to her. "Aaron handled that," he said. "You knew, most of the time." Then he explained the pressure I had ignored. He had gone 9 weeks without a paycheck the previous year. Aaron had carried a tax bill on a credit card. Parts for large conversions tied up cash before customer financing cleared. He said, the emergency work had stopped being a favor. It had become a promise Ruth made with his payroll. That grievance was legitimate. The dinner was still cruel. I asked why he had waited to confront her in public. Cole said private conversations always became my building, my sacrifice, and my history. He wanted one conversation where I could not walk into a bay and fix something. "So, you chose a place where she couldn't leave without making a scene." He looked at the shelving behind me. "I handled it badly. You handled it cruelly." "Fine, cruelly." I asked whether he would apologize and stop using Ruth as unpaid staff. He said yes to both. Then I brought up August. Cole had assumed we would renew because his bank and his schedule depended on it. I reminded him that no renewal had been signed. He asked whether I was ending the arrangement because of dinner. Dinner showed me the arrangement is no longer good for this family. That is the same thing with nicer words. He was partly right. I had brought a 1-page notice stating that I would not renew Bridgeline's lease after August 31st. It did not remove the company early or change the current rent. It gave Cole nearly 5 months to relocate. I signed it on the counter beside the parts scanner and handed it to him before speaking to Ruth again. Cole folded the notice and put it in his back pocket. "Now you get to be the man who defended her." I left without answering. On the drive home, I kept hearing that sentence because it named something I had not admitted. Defending Ruth felt clean. Using the lease felt powerful. I had mixed the two before either of us had time to decide what justice looked like. Ruth was in the backyard checking the cover over our raised garden beds. March wind pulled at her hair. I told her what I had done. She stood with one hand on the wooden frame. "You signed it?" I said yes. "Without me." "The building is in my name." I regretted saying it while the words were still in the air. Ruth stepped away from the garden bed. "So is the marriage certificate, Frank. You still ask me before you move out." "I'm not moving out. You know what I mean." She walked inside and closed the back door without slamming it. The reduced rent had started as a way to protect urgent service, but the business had changed. Lowered floor conversions filled the center bays, fleet customers expected fixed delivery dates, and insurance costs had climbed. Cole measured each hour against payroll, while Ruth measured it against the person waiting at home. I had stood between them and called that balance. Usually, I was postponing an argument. Aaron had warned me 2 years earlier while we watched a technician align a folding ramp. She said Cole signed the Friday checks while Ruth and I still described Bridgeline as a family mission. I answered that the reduced rent was part of that mission. Aaron rubbed her forehead and said, "That is exactly the problem." I did not ask her to explain. I took her for coffee and waited for the discomfort to become polite again. For 3 days, she spoke to me about groceries, weather, and a loose hinge on the hall closet. She did not mention Cole or the lease. Cole called her the first evening. She let it ring. He called the next afternoon. She answered and went into the laundry room, shutting the door behind her. When she came out, I asked whether he had apologized. He did. Did you believe him? She nodded. Her answer was not the one I expected. Ruth picked up a basket of towels. He said the sentence was ugly, and he knew it before he finished saying it. I believe that. Then what? Then he spent 20 minutes explaining why he was under pressure. So he excused it. No, he explained it. Those are different, even when you don't like the explanation. She carried the towels upstairs. I wanted Cole's apology to be false because false apologies are easy to refuse. A real apology from a man who still believed he was right about the business was harder. By Friday, the whole shop knew about the non-renewal. Dana came to my house at 6 in the evening, wearing work boots and a Bridgeline jacket. Ruth invited her in. I did not. Dana remained standing in the entryway. She told me I had every right not to renew, then warned that every accessible vehicle shop within 50 miles was already booked through summer. I reminded her that Bridgeline still had 5 months. She explained that the floor drop station would take weeks to move, the new exhaust system would need permits, and customer vans were scheduled into September. Cole should not have booked work without a signed renewal, she said, but families and employees would still carry the result. Ruth asked Dana whether Cole had told employees why I ended the lease. He said it was a family dispute. That is accurate, I said. Dana looked at me. He also said you wanted the business to stay a charity, and he wanted to run it like a company. That is less accurate. It sounds accurate from the shop floor. Ruth motioned toward the living room. Dana shook her head. Dana had an offer from a dealership in Columbus and no longer knew whether to refuse it. She reminded me that 2 technicians had children in the same school district and that Erin handled her mother's appointments on Tuesdays. We're employees, Frank. We're not part of whatever this is between you, she said. Then she left. Ruth watched through the front window until Dana reached her car. You need to fix the part that belongs to you, she said. I can't take back the notice and pretend nothing happened. I didn't ask you to. What are you asking? To remember there are people in that building who did not eat dinner with us. The following Monday, Bridgeline stopped accepting new emergency work. Cole said the pause was necessary while he evaluated relocation costs. I suspected he was also making a point. Ruth said both things could be true. 3 days later, a white minivan arrived on a tow truck with its side ramp stuck halfway out. The owner, a respiratory therapist named Paula, had used Bridgeline for years. Her husband called Ruth because he still had her personal number. Ruth told him she no longer worked with the business. He said, I thought you were the reason they answered. She held the phone away from her ear for a second. Then she gave him the number of another shop in Cincinnati and warned him the wait might be long. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, though she was not writing anything. I liked being the reason they answered, she said. I know that. No, you liked that I was useful. I liked that people called me. I pulled out the chair across from her. She continued before I sat. Cole was wrong about why I did it. He was not wrong that I kept doing it after I should have stopped. Did Erin ask you to keep taking the calls? Ruth looked toward the dark window. Sometimes. How often? I'm not sure. You know. She pressed the cap onto her pen. Most Fridays. Only then did I understand that the arrangement had not continued by accident. Erin came over the next afternoon after Ruth asked her directly. She arrived alone and left her coat on. That usually meant she did not intend to stay. Ruth placed the black emergency phone on the table between them. Erin had returned it after Cole's apology. "Why did you keep forwarding this to me?" Ruth asked. Erin looked at the phone. "Because you always said yes." "That is not an answer. We couldn't afford another dispatcher." Cole said I interfered. "You did interfere." Ruth sat back. Erin's face tightened. She listed the parts Ruth had promised, the appointments she had changed, and the customers she had invited before the technicians had room. Ruth said the business existed for those people. Erin answered that it also existed for employees with mortgages. Whenever Ruth took a call, Cole could sleep and Erin could finish insurance claims. When a free repair was promised, Erin had to make the numbers work later. "So you used her," I said. Erin looked at me. "You all used each other." She said I had used cheap rent to shape Cole's business, while Cole had used a building he could not otherwise afford. Ruth had used the phone to remain connected to her old work. Erin had used her mother because she was exhausted. Ruth lowered her eyes. Erin's voice softened when she added, "And when it got ugly, Dad used the lease because he could." No one spoke for several seconds. The refrigerator compressor started behind me. I asked Erin what she wanted. "I want out of Bridgeline by summer." Ruth looked up. "Out of the business?" "That's right. Are you leaving Cole?" "I did not say that." Erin stood and pulled on her coat. "I trained as an occupational therapy assistant. I liked working with patients. Somewhere along the way, everyone decided I was the family office manager because I could keep 3 adults from yelling at the same time." She opened the front door, then turned toward me. "Do not renew the lease if you don't want to. Just stop telling yourself you did it only for Mom." The door closed behind her. Ruth remained at the table. She touched the black phone once, then pushed it toward me. "I don't want it back," she said. I did not know whether she meant the phone, the role, or the years. Perhaps she meant all 3. The next week, Cole asked Ruth and me to meet at the shop before opening. He had set 4 folding chairs near the alignment rack. There was no coffee, no folder, and no speech prepared on a table. Dana was there because she had insisted on representing the employees. Cole spoke first. "I found 2 possible buildings," he said. "One is too small for conversions. The other needs a new entrance and more electrical work than I can finance." Dana added, "The small one could handle repairs and hand controls, not floor drops." Cole nodded. "That would cut almost half our revenue." I asked him what he wanted from me. "A 5-year renewal at market rent, no free emergency bay, no family labor, clean separation." Ruth said, "You want the building without the reason we rented it to you." "I want a business that can pay people." "You could have told me that before dinner." I tried. "You complained. You did not tell me you were routing calls to me because you could not hire someone." Cole looked at Erin, though she was not there. "I should have stopped that." "You should have." "I thought Erin had." Dana shifted in her chair. "She did for 2 weeks. Then a client called Cole at midnight, and he switched it back." Cole looked at her. "That was 1 weekend. It was 4. He rubbed his palms on his work pants. Nothing about the admission felt timed for a dramatic reveal. It was an ordinary workplace fact people had avoided because the arrangement was convenient. Cole faced Ruth again. "I used the help. I resented the help. Both are true." Ruth nodded. "That sounds closer." Then he turned to me. "Will you renew?" I said I needed time. Cole gave a tired laugh. You already gave notice. I can still negotiate. So can I. For the first time since dinner, I believed there might be a way to keep the lease without returning to the old arrangement. Cole's apology had been real. His grievance was real. Ruth no longer wanted a role in the company. Market rent could end the subsidy, and a written boundary could end the late-night phone calls. For 2 days, I leaned toward renewal. Then Ruth asked me to visit the county career center with her. A transportation instructor named Malik Owens had been looking for a building where students could learn adaptive vehicle repair. Regular auto programs taught brakes, diagnostics, and engines. Very few taught how to service a wheelchair lift, install hand controls, or understand why a half-inch of ramp angle could decide whether someone entered a van independently. Malik had contacted Ruth months earlier. She had not mentioned it because the idea felt too large and the building was occupied. We toured his current lab, which was 2 cramped bays behind a high school auto shop. One student was trying to diagnose a transfer seat using a wiring diagram spread across a rolling cart. Another had never seen a wheelchair tie-down retractor outside a catalog. Malik did not ask for the building. He asked whether I would teach 6 Saturdays a year. I'm retired, I said. So are half the people who know this equipment. Ruth smiled for the first time in days. On the drive home, she said nothing about the lease. She did not need to. The alignment shop could keep serving the same community without keeping our family tangled inside it. The career center could lease the front bays. A nonprofit transportation program had already shown interest in operating an emergency repair bay there. The rent would be lower than Cole's market proposal. The renovation would cost me money. I would also have to wait through a public approval process that might fail. It was not a clever financial move. That mattered. If I chose the career center, I could not pretend the decision was simply about maximizing rent or protecting my property. I would be choosing the old mission over Cole's growth, and I would be paying for that choice too. Ruth asked what I was going to do. I haven't decided. Good. Why is that good? Because last time you knew before breakfast. I spent the next 2 weeks talking to people I should have spoken to before signing the notice. Dana showed me the relocation plan for the smaller building. 2 lifts could move. The floor drop station could not. 3 employees could remain immediately. The others might need temporary work elsewhere. One technician, Milo, said he would rather join the career center than move with Bridgeline. Another said he could not wait months for a public program to start. Paula, the respiratory therapist whose van had been towed, told me the emergency program mattered, but reliability mattered too. Your wife cared, she said. Sometimes caring meant we were promised a Tuesday that became a Friday. Ruth had trouble hearing that when I repeated it. She did not argue. Cole showed me Bridgeline's financials without ceremony. He had gone without a salary. He had also paid himself back later when a fleet contract cleared. Aaron's credit card had carried tax bills for 6 weeks, not 6 months. The business was strained, not collapsing. He had exaggerated some things at the parts room. I had exaggerated others in my head. The lease had become a story each of us told differently. To Cole, it proved he had never been allowed to stand alone. To Ruth, it protected a promise to families who were usually told to wait. To Aaron, it was a rope tying her to a job she had not chosen. To me, it had become evidence that my help still mattered. One Sunday morning, I went to the shop alone. I still had permission to enter as the landlord, but I used the front door during the posted maintenance window and signed the log. I did not want another argument about boundaries. The building was quiet, except for the compressor bleeding pressure through a valve near the rear wall. I had come to measure the front bays for Malik's program. Instead, I spent 20 minutes trying to coil an air hose I had installed years earlier. The hose had developed a twist near the coupling. Every time I laid one loop flat, the next one turned over. I kept starting again, as if patience could restore the shape it had when it was new. Finally, I sat on the concrete beside the alignment rack. Across the bay, grease pencil marks climbed the wall beside the service door. They showed the roof heights of different vans, so nobody raised one into a beam. Cole had written the first marks. I had added others. Dana had crossed out 2 after the lifts were replaced. There were 11 years of our hands on that wall, none of them belonging to one person alone. I pressed my thumb into my palm until the sting passed. Ending the lease did not only remove Cole from my building, it ended the last work we still understood together. I had spent most of my adult life believing repair meant returning a thing to service. Families were not machines. Sometimes a repaired relationship could not do the job it used to do. I left the air hose on the floor and went home. Ruth was reading in the living room. I told her I had decided not to renew Bridgeline's 5-year lease. She closed the book, but kept her finger between the pages. "Are you sure?" I shook my head. "Then why?" "Because a cleaner lease will not make us a cleaner family. Cole will still think the building gives us a vote. You will still hear about a stranded customer and want to step in. I will still look at reduced rent and expect gratitude." Ruth considered that. "What about the employees?" "I want to offer a 4-month transition after August. Same rent, limited to the rear bays while the career center prepares the front. The final 2 months of rent would go into a relocation account controlled by the employees, not Cole and not me. That will cost you." "I agree. Cole may refuse." "He might. And the career center may not get approval." "I understand." She opened her book again, then closed it. "You should have done this before signing the notice." "I should have." "Say that to them." "I will." The final meeting happened in Bridgeline's break room on a Wednesday at 4. The room held a small refrigerator, a microwave with one missing button, and a table meant for 4 people. 6 of us crowded around it. Cole, Aaron, Dana, Ruth, me, and Malik from the Career Center. Cole spoke first, as he had requested. He said the smaller building was available January 1st. He could preserve the repair work and hand control installations, but full conversions would stop for at least a year. One employee would transfer to a partner shop. Dana had agreed to stay only if she received written authority over scheduling and safety decisions. Dana looked at him. "And pricing on emergency repairs." "And pricing," he said. Aaron said she would leave Bridgeline at the end of June. She had accepted a position at a rehabilitation clinic 3 days a week. Cole stared at the microwave while she spoke. He knew, but the rest of us had not heard it stated that clearly. Ruth asked whether they had decided what her leaving meant for their marriage. Aaron replied, "No. We decided it means I'm leaving the business." She offered nothing more. Malik described the Career Center's proposal. It would lease the front 2 bays beginning in January, subject to board approval. The nonprofit emergency program would use 1 rear bay, 3 evenings a week. Students would not work on customer vehicles without supervision. Cole listened, then looked at me. "So you found somebody who will run the shop the way you wanted?" "No," I said. "Ruth found a school that wants to teach work we know." "Same difference. It is not the same business. It is the same building, Frank. That is always the part that matters to you. I let him finish. He said I had held the lease over him whenever we disagreed. He reminded me of 2 years when Bridgeline paid for roof repairs the lease assigned to the landlord because I was recovering from surgery. He said he had trained 3 technicians who now earned good wages. He said the company was more than the favor that started it. All of that was true. Then Ruth spoke. "Cole, you humiliated me because you were angry at Frank." Cole looked at her. "I was angry at you too. I know. You still used me to answer calls." "I did. You do not get to call that interference only when the answer costs money." He looked down at his hands. "No," he said. Ruth turned to me. "And you ended the lease before asking what I wanted, because being the defender felt better than being my husband." Erin shifted in her chair. Dana watched me without trying to rescue the conversation. "I did," I said. Cole looked up. He seemed surprised I had admitted it without adding a reason. I explained the transition offer. Bridgeline could remain in the rear bays through December under a temporary occupancy agreement. Rent would not increase. The final 2 months would be placed into an account Dana and another employee controlled for equipment moving, certification fees, or wage gaps. The 5-year renewal was off the table. Cole asked whether the transition depended on Career Center approval. "It doesn't. Does it depend on me apologizing again? Your apology is separate. Does it depend on the emergency program using my technicians? No. Your technicians stay with you." He leaned back. "Then what do you want?" "I want the old arrangement to end." "You already said that." "I mean all of it. Cheap rent with unspoken duties. Family phone calls replacing payroll. My building buying me a voice in your company. Your company borrowing Ruth when it suits you." Cole rubbed a thumb across the edge of the table. "And if I say no to the transition, then the lease still ends August 31st. He looked at Ruth. "Do you agree with that?" Ruth took a moment. "I agree the lease should end. I do not agree with how Frank started it." Cole faced me again. "So you were wrong, but you still win." The sentence landed because I had asked myself the same thing. I can admit I was wrong without putting us back there. It was the only answer I had. Cole did not accept the offer that day. He asked for a week. Dana asked for 3 days, because employees needed to know whether to search for jobs. Erin asked everyone to stop asking her to translate one man to the other. Malik left early for an evening class. Ruth and I walked to our car without waiting for Cole and Erin. Nobody suggested dinner. 4 days later, Cole accepted the transition. He added one condition: the employee relocation account would be funded whether Bridgeline moved early or stayed through December. I agreed. Dana added another: Ruth's name would be removed from all customer materials and after-hours routing immediately. Ruth agreed before I did. The next months were not dramatic. They were expensive, awkward, and full of delays. During one Saturday move, Dana discovered that the smaller building's concrete was too thin for a transfer seat hoist. Cole wanted to bolt it down and reinforce it later. Dana refused, even when that meant sending another week of work to a competitor. I expected Cole to overrule her. Instead, he called the contractor back and canceled 2 customer appointments himself. The decision cost him money and embarrassed him in front of the crew, but he did not blame Dana. Ruth heard about it from one of the technicians and said only, "Good." He listened. The choice did not erase the dinner, but it reminded me that a person could behave badly in one room and responsibly in another. The Career Center board postponed its vote because one member questioned whether adaptive vehicle repair belonged in a public program. Malik returned with employment data and letters from transportation agencies. The proposal passed in July by one vote. Bridgeline's smaller building needed a wider service door. The permit took longer than Cole expected. Dana spent 2 Saturdays marking equipment locations with tape while arguing with the electrician about outlet height. One technician left for Columbus. Milo joined Malik's program as a part-time lab assistant. The remaining employees split their time between moving equipment and finishing scheduled repairs. Cole sold the floor drop station to a shop in Indiana. I watched it leave on a flatbed, wrapped in blue tarp. That machine had been his proudest purchase. He stood near the loading door with his hands in his pockets. "You could still change your mind," he said. "The school already signed. You changed your mind once about the transition." I changed the method, not the boundary. He nodded as if he disliked the answer, but understood it. Bridgeline reopened in the smaller building in November. The business survived. It was not the company Cole had planned. Revenue dropped. The showroom disappeared. He returned to doing more repairs himself because he could no longer afford a full-time service writer. He also stopped taking fleet contracts that kept vans waiting for weeks. Dana created a written emergency work policy with a limited monthly budget. If the budget was used, customers received referrals instead of promises. Ruth read the policy once. She did not suggest changes. Aaron started at the rehabilitation clinic. She and Cole remained married, though they lived separately for part of the winter. She called Ruth every few weeks. She called me less often. I did not blame Cole for every distance, and I stopped asking Aaron for reports about their marriage. At the December Career Center meeting, a board member referred to Cole as the former tenant who had abandoned the community repair model. I corrected him. I said Cole had built Bridgeline into a real employer, trained skilled technicians, and carried more financial risk than Ruth and I had understood. I also said our family had failed to separate charity, labor, and control before the failure became public. The board member looked disappointed. He had wanted a simpler story. So had I, for a while. The new adaptive transport lab opened the following spring. On the first Saturday, Malik asked me to demonstrate a lift that clicked but would not move. 6 students stood around a stripped training van with notebooks in their hands. I told them not to replace a motor because a sound frightened them. Start with the ground. Check where water and salt collect. Follow the failure instead of the noise. One student found the corroded connection behind the access cover. Ruth watched from the doorway, wearing a visitor badge. She had declined every offer to manage calls for the nonprofit. She volunteered twice a month with a transportation advocacy group instead, where her job had hours, a description, and somebody other than family to tell her when to go home. After class, she and I walked across the parking lot. My phone buzzed. Aaron had sent 3 possible dates for a family counselor. The message included her, Cole, Ruth, and me. Ruth read it over my shoulder. "Are you going?" she asked. "I am." "Which date?" "I don't know yet." She handed the phone back. We got into the car without answering immediately. The lease was over. The business had moved. The family was not repaired, and nobody had earned the right to pretend otherwise. But for the first time in years, each person's work belonged to them. Ruth could help without being borrowed. Aaron could leave without making us choose sides. Cole could run his company without treating reduced rent as gratitude he could never finish paying. I could own a building without using it to settle every argument I was afraid to have. Some distance remained between us. It was honest distance. Would you have kept the non-renewal in place after Cole gave a real apology? Or did I use the lease to win a family argument that should have stayed at the dinner table?